Dave, we're ready. Okay, everybody, welcome to the January 24th, 2019 meeting of the Penfield Planning Board. Allison, would you please call the roll?
Hetzke?
Here.
Bastian?
Here.
Knauer?
Here.
Tidings?
Here.
Burton?
Here.
Nersinger?
Here.
Sangster?
Here.
Weissar?
Here.
All right, we have minutes from the January 10th meeting. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review them.
Motion to approve. I'll second.
Okay.
Hetzke?
Aye.
Bastian?
Aye.
Burton?
Aye.
Knauer?
Aye.
Tidings?
Aye.
Okay, Zach, want to go through the agenda or table application?
Get my papers organized and my brain organized, and we'll keep going.
We don't have that much time.
I never have that much time. I never have that much time. Okay, we have one. Oh, I know. I throw it out there. I want to see what comes back. One at tabled application for this evening is for the project at Penfield Square. Last time the board met, we completed the seeker process. When that deck was issued, all that was left was preparing a draft approval resolution for the board's review and consideration, which was sent to you last week in preparation for this meeting. Before we jump into that, I just wanted to recap some of the items in the project. We were able to put together a checklist based on factors for consideration. I believe Allison printed one in your packets this evening that you should have in front of you. Mine's somewhere.
So what happened to the form that we were using?
This is a modified, enhanced version
Okay,
of
but
it.
this form has 2 columns.
Correct.
Doesn't indicate who looked at it, or what information was used to...
Summarizing the board's discussion and the dates it took place, the content is all into the approval resolution when we go through those factors and the board's findings for each one of these items.
Yeah, so there's 2 things here that I don't think are... So,
What would you like to discuss?
so you've got date completed, handicapped accessibility. So who did an analysis of this application that is willing to say that all of the requirements for handicapped accessibility are compliant?
Twofold on that. I know that AJ is the lead on this. It's been talked about on a number of occasions, and ultimately, that does fall to the building department when permits are received.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to all of that, but we look at town engineers reviewing the sidewalk ramps as they're going through and planning out the sidewalk routes. Those were reviewed as part of the building as the site plans and the details and the specs in that. So that's been reviewed by the town engineer, which would have been communicated in the PRC memo early on. So items like that from our side of things.
I think you're seeing my point, though. A date here, December 13th, doesn't indicate any of those things. And then we have building elevations. So we talked about the fact that we don't have all the building elevations. So do we want to have this document out here that suggests that the board and town staff have completed, and I don't know what that means, date.
How do you mean we don't have all the elevations? We reviewed that 2 meetings ago.
Well, we have 2 buildings that haven't been finalized.
No, but we've placed conditions in the approval resolution regarding those
Okay,
topics.
so again, do we want to have this?
This is meant to be a quick reference at this point.
Okay, but that's not what it says.
Okay.
So this is part of the public record. This is our biggest town project to date.
Currently, it's an internal document, but yeah.
Well, this is part of the public record. Right?
Sure.
So, you know,
I'd rather
I
just
don't-
kind of go through the project.
So if you want, instead of saying date completed, do if we put like just date reviewed or?
well, I asked twice about the document that we used before, about continuing to use that document for significant projects. And I don't know why that was watered down to this, but this is not the same thing. So,
I'll look at that for future projects if that's okay.
I don't think date completed is
this checklist is meant to basically reference, correct me if I'm wrong here, some of the dates that we discussed and reviewed a lot of the things that were in the application. And the details from these are in the draft resolution. So,
And to be honest, I spent a lot more time on getting the resolution ready than I could this
You know,
checklist.
I'm not trying to beat you up, Zach, but, you know, I asked about this twice. It was here, we talked about it, we agreed that we were gonna do it, and now we have something else here that is not as comprehensive, and doesn't really have the same effect
For the board members.
for the approval of this project.
well, the approval of the project and all the details of that are in the draft approval resolution. So, and there are factors of consideration for consideration in here that are pretty well delineated. I guess I'm not 100%. What you wanted to have was the
The form that
The
we used in
form-
the past.
and that incorporated in with the draft approval as part of that document?
No, that wouldn't be part of the document.
So we don't need to get into those details right now, but I want to go on record and say that this is not what I thought was going to come to us. It's, you know, notes and other items is blank. It's just, you know, I worked very hard to create a document that was approved by the board and used before, and that I thought we were going to use here, and,
My apologies for not using that form.
no apology necessary.
No, it is. I didn't use the right form, and I'll make sure it doesn't happen again.
Okay.
If we move past it, is there anything in the resolution that anyone would like to discuss that you may have found to be either something to point out or something to correct?
For me, there was just some minor typo type things and edits of that nature.
Okay.
Um,
And I can work with you after
mhm.
to correct those items. You don't need to drill through
No,
all
we
of
don't have
those
to go
tonight.
through all that.
No.
Has everybody else had a chance to review it? Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, I don't have any issues. All that.
I have a couple updates though.
Okay.
Just as things that I thought of as I was writing the resolution that the applicant was able to provide me going into this meeting. I was reviewing the site plans and I was able to clarify that the dumpster enclosure, while the details in the site plan are standard details, they are working to provide, they will include materials and colors, so on and so forth, for the dumpster enclosure that will be consistent with the rest of the buildings. It will not be standard spec as you've seen the site plan details, so I was able to clear that up with the applicant. Here's the other part. They are going to be adding some landscaping around the pump station location and the backup generator, which is also going to be surrounded by a black-coated chain link fence, 6 feet tall. They're going to be working with the DPW department and the town engineer about what's required inside that fence as part of the final layout of that. But as we mentioned before, the applicant has been working with the town engineer on what size pump needs to be in there, how all that's going to flow, and all that's been completed. So it's just not, the aesthetics of it is being wrapped up. And I also just clarified, because I don't know if we had a chance to look at it, but HVAC units, they will be roof mounted for the independent living building. And for the independent living and for the out parcels, where those will be ground mounted, those will also be landscaped around it as well. So they'll be shielded accordingly. So those are the only updates I had. And again, the board has taken a hard look at pedestrian connectivity with this project as it is a mixed-use application. We've looked at architectural several times, landscaping, there was a great presentation of that a couple meetings ago, I believe that was December, we talked about that. And again, architecture, thorough review of that. The conditions that we spoke of earlier for the outbuildings where when a tenant is selected and they come to the final building designs of what those out parcels would be, there's conditions in the approval resolution where they would come back to the board and look at it as if there are changes to the size of the building, that's a site plan modification, as well as any changes to the architecture that you reviewed in the building elevations. What else? Talked about the crosswalk last time, that was resolved. Again, utilities have all been reviewed by the town engineer, he's satisfied with those. Lighting, we are working through the final elements of that. They're typically a pre-Mylar item anyways because we're looking at the decorative lighting elements at this point.
Great.
I can't think of anything else that jumps out as me as any additional talking points.
I think we have it pretty well covered. Any other comments?
No.
Okay. Well, with that said, I'm gonna entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
All right. We got moved and seconded.
Hetzke,
Aye.
Bastian,
Aye.
Burton,
Aye.
Canower,
Aye.
Tidings.
All right.
Thank
It's
you.
all set with
first
that, we'll
mixed-use
be in
project.
touch.
Yes, exactly.
We'll be in touch with the pre-Mylar instructions for the post-approval and all that.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all your time and
Sure.
effort.
Thank you. Good luck. All right. We have a miscellaneous.
Correct. One miscellaneous item, it's for the Agor property on Panorama Trail. The board did a site plan approval. At the end of 2017, nothing has taken place on the site, so they requested an extension to their site plan approval. We received a letter for a 150-day approval. It's near 6 months, but it's more of a 5-month extension. I'll leave it up to the board if you wish to work with the number they proposed, or if you want a 6-month extension, it is up to you. And if there are any questions about the project, let me know, but it was for a parking expansion.
There wasn't a date, they just said 150.
Correct.
So if we make
From
it
today,
from today, like end of June,
pretty much.
yeah.
Wait, do we want to make it that or 6 months or?
I've never heard of a 5-month extension.
Right.
I'd go 6 months.
When did the current expire?
December.
December. Okay.
Are they gonna be able to get it in? Because in the past, we've kind of extended
a
that
good
time
point.
period to, just so they don't have to come back
It's a good point.
again.
That was an estate thing, right?
That's correct. The
Yeah,
latest,
We've done that before.
the latest is that they're just waiting to transfer the property where they were going to do the parking expansion along with their current holdings from the family, from his father, from his mother to him, the owner. So they're kind of working out those fine details, but
Probate issues or who
Yeah.
knows. I would move to give them a 12-month extension.
Second.
it's not uncommon.
I don't have
Yeah.
a problem with it either.
I have no problem.
12 months.
Okay. So we got 12 months on the table.
Well, that was Burton and Canower.
Tidings.
Tidings, sorry.
That's when.
Hetzke,
Aye.
Bastian,
Aye.
Burton,
Aye.
Canower,
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
All right. Any other business before our sketch plan hearing?
No, sir.
Okay, it is 6:47. We will recess until 7 o'clock when we reconvene up at the dais for the sketch plan hearing.
Terrible image.
I want to welcome to the January 24th meeting of the Penfield Planning Board. We'll begin the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Tonight we have one item on our agenda. It's a sketch plan. And if you're not familiar with the sketch plan process, sketch plan is not a formal application. It's an idea or a concept that a developer or an applicant has for a piece of property, and they want to run the ideas past the board and the public to get some feedback and then make their decision as to whether they move forward with an actual application or not. So that said, there typically is not a lot of detail on a sketch plan. So you won't see a lot of engineering details. You'll see some general things, but there's a lot of, if the application ends up becoming a formal application, a lot more detailed engineering work will need to be done during that process. And the reason for the sketch plan is so that they don't have to commit those resources at this time and not have it go through, or they want to get feedback, basically. So the applicant will present the project to the board. We will ask questions, get feedback, and then we'll open it up to the audience, and we welcome your input. That's what this is for. I have a couple of slips for people who wanted to speak. You don't need to fill one of these out, but I'll start with these two, and then we'll go from there. If you want to speak, come up to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record, and address your comments to the board and not the applicant. And please silence all your electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. And with that, Zach, would you please read the sketch plan application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application number 1, BME Associates, 10 Liftbridge Lane East, Fairport, New York, 14450, on behalf of 777 Panorama Properties, LLC, requests an informal discussion before the board with plans for an office park to be known as Panorama Park, with associated site improvements on a total of 55.3 acres located at 125 Panorama Creek Drive. The property is now or formerly owned by 777 Panorama Properties, LLC, and zoned limited industrial. Application number 19P-0001, SBL number 138.12-1-1.1, and I just want to make a correction. The SBL number that I read was updated from the legal notice that was posted, as well as in the postcards that was sent out. The one I just read is the correct one.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Peter Vars from BME Associates, appearing tonight on behalf of 777 Panorama Properties. As mentioned, we are here this evening for a sketch plan review of property located at a street address of 125 Panorama Creek Drive. The proposal is for a proposed office business park for 55.3 acres that is located on Panorama Trail South. As mentioned, the property is zoned LI Light Industrial. The property is located on Panorama Trail South. It occupies about 350 feet of frontage on that county highway. It is bounded to the south by New York State Route 441 and to the north by the Thermo Fisher facility. The 55.3 acres, just to give you a little history of this property, I guess recent history, was created in the single tax parcel in 2018 as the owner acquired and consolidated 4 separate tax parcels over the past several years. Some of these you're familiar with, and some of them maybe not so familiar with. The first parcels they acquired were those right along Panorama Trail. We know them as the former Hilton Hotel properties. Then he proceeded to acquire the former Camp Hakamo lands, which had a separate application not too long ago here. But he proceeded to acquire those lands. And then he acquired some lands from E.J. Del Monte, which were lands along the 441 right-of-way. And then all of these properties came together when he was able to acquire excess property that Thermo Fisher had. By acquiring the Thermo Fisher property, that provided access to this property off of Panorama Creek Drive, which was very important. It was in 2018 when this planning board actually approved the consolidation of these 4 parcels into the single parcel that we have today. Also in 2018, I wish to point out, is that the town board did issue a grading and EPOD permit to the property owner so that they could do some limited site work on the property to start establishing the future roadway, and that was done primarily to get so that they could begin planning the development, which I'll walk you through this evening. What's interesting about this, where we are today, is by consolidating this into 55.3 acres and into one parcel, it really provides a unique opportunity to prepare one cohesive development plan for this property that didn't exist even a year ago. When these were 4 individual tax parcels owned by 4 different owners, there could be no synergy in the planning. It was the Thermo Fisher property that was located in this area that was kind of the linchpin to bring them all together. And now we have gone from 4 individual properties, 4 different owners, 4 different ideas and thoughts, to a single property and a single owner with a single vision. And what that is the owner is proposing a business park where individual sites would be subdivided, designed, and developed on a site-specific basis to meet individual user needs. And I will use this reference a few times this evening because I believe we're all familiar with it. It is, the concept here we're thinking about is very similar to how Linden Oaks was designed and developed. And if you're familiar with that Linden Oaks was originally designed and developed where it was just the roadway that was developed and the areas were left, and then the individual sites were fit into the topography and into the woodlots so that it could retain as much of its natural character as possible. And I think we would all agree it's one of the premier properties on the east side of Monroe County. That's their vision here. The property does contain wood, slope, and flood EPODs, environmental protection overlay districts. Allyn's Creek does clip the northwest portion of the property. There is a lot of topography on this property. The elevation difference from the southwest corner to Panorama Trail to the northeast corner is 140 feet. The elevation, what we call at the top of the hill, is elevation 420, and the elevation down at Panorama Trail South is elevation 280. So we are talking about a significant grade change from southwest to northeast. The proposed development at this time, as I mentioned, would be just to develop the road only at this time. And the reason for that is so that we can then individually design future sites on a per tenant or per user basis. We have identified the probable locations of those by analyzing the existing topography that's there, taking into account the slope EPODs also. And that's what was used as the basis to prepare the sketch plan. What we did after we made that initial submittal at the request of the PRC, we did then complete an initial analysis of trying to get a sense of, okay, what would be the size of buildings and then the necessary parking to support those users? What would it start looking like? And that's what this rendered site plan is here, and I think it was possibly provided to you this week also. Just to give you a sense of scale, what this shows is about 235,000 square feet of total space. What we're looking at here are buildings that would be 2 to 3 stories. The LI zoning district has a height a maximum of 50 feet, which would be a 3-story building in this instance. But one of the driving factors will be the parking as it relates to the area needed for that. In addition to what we showed here, this area here along Panorama Trail, there's about 3.5 acres there that could be developed. We didn't specifically do any layout there because that's going to be a mix. And it'll be a mix of office and then possibly retail or restaurant uses, again, based on tenant demand. But we do believe that we could probably get a combination of about an additional 100,000 square feet. So in all, we're looking on this 55 acres of a development scale of around 350,000 square feet sitting here today at this sketch plan review. What we envision for an ultimate site plan application would be the application to develop the park's infrastructure. It would be a proposed roadway that at this time we would propose would be a dedicated road. It would be the supporting utilities along that roadway, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water mains. It would be initial grading of these pad areas just to start establishing them because it would help with marketing the properties. And it would be the complete stormwater management plan for the park. The management plan would involve 2 stormwater management facilities. One is located here at Panorama Trail. There actually is an existing facility there today. It was constructed as part of the Hilton Hotel development before that project was suspended. We would expand that to account for the additional development. And then the second facility would be located here at the northwest corner of the property, adjacent to the Camp Hakamo Pond, or the former Camp Hakamo Pond, but most importantly it's located along Allyn's Creek. This stormwater facility also does another thing. We've prepared this layout. The Allyn's Creek Valley Townhouse development is here. And locating this here allows us with the floodplain to stay out of the floodplain of Allyn's Creek, and basically we're moving the development away from the townhouse neighborhood. One of the things also with having the knowledge that the development intensity is about 350,000 square feet is a traffic study has been commissioned. The scope for that study was established through consultation with the Monroe County Department of Transportation and the New York State Department of Transportation. That study would be submitted with our formal site plan application. We anticipate that study to be complete in the middle of February. What we can tell you, we've had initial discussions with Monroe County Department of Transportation, as they are the governing agency of Panorama Trail South, and that was to develop a probable access plan. As we said, the property does now have access off Panorama Creek Drive. The importance of that is that allows, therefore, signalized access to Panorama Trail, because the Panorama Creek Drive intersection is signalized. There would also be another access out onto Panorama Trail South. At this time, the county is allowing for that access to be a right in, right out, and left turn in into that intersection. So the only movement that would be restricted would be a left turn out, with the thought being that traffic needing to head north on Panorama Trail South would use the Panorama Creek Drive signalized intersection. We acknowledge that our next steps, in moving forward with a final site or a preliminary and final site plan application, we would engage the seeker process with you. We would provide the environmental assessment form and all the necessary drainage and traffic studies. We know we would have to be required to apply for the EPOD permits as it relates to the woodlots and the steep slopes or any disturbance or encroachment into the EPODs. And we do acknowledge that we did receive PRC comments as it relates to this sketch plan application, and any application we submit would have to address those also. So at this time, given the sketch plan review, we'd be more than happy to hear any of your comments or questions.
Pete, thanks for the presentation. Couple of questions that I have. The first one, buffering and trees, and describe what the vision is for maintaining buffering to the surrounding neighborhoods.
So, and I'm assuming do you need me to use the
It
microphone,
would
Allison?
help if it's on, yeah. Green light,
No.
power button on the left, right.
Good? There we go. Okay. I'm assuming, AJ, you're talking in this area here.
Yes.
We're not as necessarily concerned here.
Correct.
Okay. So, probably the core principle we're identifying here is a 100-foot minimum along this area here. The topography plays a lot in this also. So we're looking at not disturbing a minimum of 100 feet along these property lines. When we get down into this area, it's still that, plus the addition of, I can show it here, in this area here is the DEC regulated area as it relates to some wetlands adjacent to the Allyn Creek Valley, plus also the floodplain. We have no intent to encroach into the floodplain or disturb that. So these natural features are going to help institute the buffer that would exist here. And then obviously, depending on how properties are developed, as necessary, how we work with the topography, any additional buffering that would be required or desired would get worked into the individual site plan designs.
Okay. Thank you. And then where Road A meets Road C at that elbow,
Yes.
that stub, is that in there for access to the proposed development to the east?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's primarily what it is there for, is just,
Yeah, when I looked at the
again,
plan,
until we know how that lays out.
Okay.
The one thing we know, this layout was based on two things. We pushed it as far north as we could because we wanted to maximize this area. This is actually, when Hilton was here, this area was all graded out. You can go out there today, you can see the light pole
poles.
bases that were put in and everything. But we provided space here because actually when Hilton was developed, this is a topsoil pile that's still there today. But the desire of the applicant is they want to keep a berm here because Thermo Fisher stores their trailers here and everything, which is to screen that view from whatever occurs here.
Okay. You'd mentioned that you'd like to build the road and then do some basic site prep for each of the
Correct.
site pads.
Yep.
How many trees are we talking about clearing for that process? What's that going to look like?
I would tell you, I don't have those numbers obviously with me this evening, but I would tell you that the assuming we are allowed to move forward, the application we would submit would include the necessary EPOD permit applications, where we would, and plus with the EAF, would identify the acreages that would be cleared. And what I can tell you is really what is the dominating, or maybe the controlling feature out here as it relates to design is the topography. For instance, here on this rendering, we show these trees to be saved. If you look in the application materials we did give you, there's 110 feet elevation difference from here to here. My point is, when we talk about this elevation difference that happens on this site, you have some plateaus and then it just drops, and then you have another set of plateaus. So that's how these areas were somewhat selected. It's like, okay, where we used as a rule of thumb, where can we identify where we'd have a 5% cross slope? Because that we can work with. And so we understand all that detail we would be required to put in, along with following the guidelines of the EPOD permits.
Okay. And you mentioned the proposed access to Panorama Trail
Yes.
as basically a three-way.
Yes.
How do you propose to make that actually a three-way and have
Sure.
people significantly discouraged from making a left?
Yep.
Heading north onto Panorama
So
Trail?
we've actually met with the county, I want to say at least twice, it may have been 3 times already, on this design. And one of the primary ways is the fact of just the functionality of being able to make a left turn out of here. The thing with this being an office business park is the majority of the users are going to be people that are there every day, okay? And thus, it won't take long to learn that if I have to go north on Panorama Trail, my best way to get out is to go to Panorama Creek and get the signal to allow me to go out. But the geometry of this will be designed, and the county has already provided us the geometry that they desire, because basically this right turn will be a sweep almost, because it blends into the lanes as they relate to merging into the 441 access area here. So that this will be a sweep, and then this is just the entrance lane. There will be a striped left turn lane in. The county has identified how they want that striped and constructed.
Okay. Can you speak to the potential target market of this? You mentioned that it was mostly an office park, not necessarily industrial. Are we looking at warehouse manufacturing type?
You know, first of all,
applications, or
I
just-
wouldn't rule out anything, you know,
Okay.
as it relates to what's allowed under the LI ordinance. But I can say that the desire is that this would be Class A office space, but there is the possibility that there'd be light industrial flex space. One of the partners in this venture is Rich Lafroy Builders, and if you're familiar with his work, for lack of a better term, out in the Henrietta area, in the Victor area, you know, for instance, he did the Calkins Road campus. And that's probably what we see there. Like, for instance, that's where Paychex has just now located their corporate campus. But on the other hand, they do have some spaces there that are very well done, that do include some modest assembly space in there, and those types of uses. It is a high-tech use. So, but as we said, all of that would be, you know, subject to individual site plan review.
Okay. Thank you. Any other?
Yeah.
board members, Bob?
Hey, Peter. A few questions for the residential properties to the west, given that the proposed buildings would be 2 to 3 stories. What would be the visual from that vantage point, would you anticipate?
I would tell you this, Bob, is that I think that we would address that with the application, because again, it'll depend on whether it's a 2-story or a 3-story structure. And again, everything relates to topography. You know, case in point, you know, this building here, there's 14 feet of difference between this parking lot and that parking lot. For instance, this building could lay out where it's a 2-story or a single-story exposure here, and an additional story below here. So that's going to be somewhat user-driven, but we can, within the application, because we'll have grades established, and then we can assume standard building heights, and then be able to look at that as how it relates. So I take that comment to, we'll take that comment into account as part of our application.
The roadway that you show, what do you anticipate the percent of grade of that road?
Sure. This is designed to have a maximum grade of 8%, which is the maximum allowed under the town's dedicated road standard.
Pretty steep.
Pardon?
Pretty steep.
It actually, it works out pretty well for what was already there, because there was a haul road there for the longest of time, and that's basically the pathway we're following.
And you mentioned building out the infrastructure, water, sewer. Would that include electric, or would that be done later?
Yes, gas and electric would be
Gas, okay.
be provided also. That is correct.
Okay. Thanks, Pete.
I got one question about the traffic. I'm trying to compare it to Linden Oaks, like you said, Peter, a little bit. And you know how they come out of Linden Oaks there, you got like 2 lanes, trying to make the left to get
Yeah.
back up the expressway, 441. And visualize that, I mean, or keep that in mind. So when the traffic comes out onto, I mean, can you see or explain how that might work traffic-wise? How you see it?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is, first of all, when we talk about kind of the Linden Oaks concept, it was how Linden Oaks was developed within its topography.
Right.
This is a fraction of the size of Linden Oaks. You know, some of those larger buildings in Linden Oaks are 120,000 square feet. I mean, it doesn't take much, so it's a fraction of that size. But I can tell you, Terry, that the traffic analysis that we did and have been working with the county and the state on does account for the queuing. They have done all of their field work, so they've analyzed the queuing of this interchange. And actually, they believe, I should say they, is the state and the county are comfortable with how this will operate based on how they have it set up and the traffic patterns that are there. And then the expected distribution, which is they believe the majority of this traffic is going to want to get to 441.
Thank you.
But I guess all I would add is that'll be fully detailed in the traffic study that's being prepared.
Thank you.
Peter, do you have a time frame in mind from beginning of building of the roads to the first building being completed?
Sure. Well, I could give you the desired timeline.
Yeah,
How's that?
that's-
I mean, it is the applicant's intent that they would like to construct the road, the infrastructure, develop the property in 2019. They believe it's very important to get this road in because it is, they believe, and I agree with them, that it's a property that needs to be seen to be marketed. But until they get the road in, they're not going to start aggressively marketing it because they want to be able to show people this is where your building can sit within its environment, those types of things. So now it is very feasible that we could see activity in here, you know, in the latter part of 2019. I mean, they're not going to just sit on it, but it is obviously tenant driven.
So it's going to be a multi-year development. I mean, it's going to take a few years.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that,
Okay.
yes.
So during that time, you're going to have this completed roadway, road A, B, and C.
Yep.
What kind of security measures are you going to put in place so you don't get unwanted traffic, late night traffic or something going down there and using this for a party spot or something like that?
You know, I don't know, so we'd have to have that discussion with the applicant
Okay.
about that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Do you foresee these properties being sold off and subdivided out? Or leased, or is that not determined yet?
It is determined. And it is, I will tell you this, the application that we submit for preliminary final will have, I'm going to use the term, suggested lot lines. Okay? Because it is the intent that these buildings will sit on their own individual parcel, that a separate tax parcel will be created. So there will be a subdivision component of the application. Now, and therefore, because then what that does for the owner, it gives them the option of either they can sell if the buyer or the end user desires to own, but it also gives the ability to build and lease if the tenant just wants to lease their space. They have the flexibility to do both, but it is the intent that these would all sit on their own tax parcel.
Okay.
Do you have a staging area designed into this plan while you're constructing the roadways and the site improvements?
I would believe it would basically be the same area they use during the summer, which is down in this area here is where they stage, because it suits itself very well for that. It's flat, it's level, it's out of the way. It's actually an area where Thermo Fisher used to store their trailers for the longest of time, for a number of years.
And given Lefroy's core business, envision all of these to be pre-engineered metal buildings?
No. No.
That's all I have.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, I'd like to open this up to the audience, and I have Marlene Shattuck. Come on up, introduce yourself, and please share your comments.
My name is Marlene Shattuck. I live at 59 Winding Creek Lane. And my townhome unit is the closest one to Camp Hakamo. And I've been aware of a lot of activity going on. A couple weeks ago on a Sunday morning, I was on my way out to church, and I heard activity going on, and there was a beeping sound, and there was a large construction vehicle going up the hill, and it turns out that it was transporting a truck, and what they were doing was they were removing apparently logs that had been cut previously and loading them onto this huge truck, and presumably to take them away to someplace else. I don't know what happened because I went off to church, and when I came back, all of the area was quiet, so they apparently completed their task. One thing I noticed some time back was that there were pink ribbons on some of the trees right across from our strip of 3 homes, and they were pink ribbons on the trees in a few spaces. And then sometime later, some blue ribbons appeared on the area that extends at the end of the strip of 3 homes that we live on, that usually the maintenance people will take their equipment and maybe dump leaves and that up there for getting rid of excess things. So one of my questions is what do the pink ribbons significance, and what is the difference between the pink and the blue?
I wish I could answer that. My guess would be it's possible that the applicant can answer that question. Do you know what they?
Yes.
Okay, would you care to share?
Sure. So the pink ribbons were for the wetland delineation that was done on the property. We did the field delineation, the points were located, and that's how the wetland limits are mapped out.
Okay.
The blue ribbons, those are survey flags just to help them with the control survey. It's just a visuals because they know then there's a property pin somewhere in the area, just helps them to get to the right area to do their survey work.
Okay, thank you. Now we know.
Now we know. Okay, for the last 3 weeks, there have been like caravans of trucks beeping, starting early in the morning, usually 7:20, 7:30. And I realize that the noise ordinance in Penfield is 7 o'clock, so they have respected that, if you will. And so these trucks go up and they're beeping. And at first I thought there was only just a couple. And I was watching, and there were like 10 in this big caravan, and all you heard was the beeping all day long. And they were working on different levels. There was a lower level, and then you could hear the truck motors, almost screaming to try to get up the hills. And then they would be coming down really quickly with their back ends filled with what looked to be dirt. And this has been going on for the last, like, 2 to 3 weeks. And I was under the understanding that once the road was cut, that what we might hear still was trucks going and dumping stone, you know, for over the winter, just to keep things in place maybe, I don't know.
For erosion control.
But the bulk then of the noise that we were expecting to hear was going to come in the spring. And this has been going on for the last 3 weeks, and if we look outside, we know it's not spring yet. So I'm just wondering what the process was that it became different than what I had been told.
Okay. Zach, do you know what is going on with that?
Yes.
And could you share?
Yep. Part of what's going on right now is what the applicant discussed earlier, is receiving the grade and fill permit as well as an EPOD permit to do some site work up there. Part of that included installing the stone road that's there, but also to do some initial clearing on those flat areas that they described, which are kind of near where those buildings are sited right now. And that was part of their permit that was approved by the town board, to do some initial work to get up there to see what's going on those hills and those plateaus. And they were just doing some minor site work there.
So will there be work continuing, putting in pads and everything?
Not pads, no. The limit of the work is capped at doing some tree removal, some very rough grading, I'll call it, and the stone access road. You won't see a concrete pad, you won't see utilities going in. As they described this evening, they haven't gotten approval for that yet. That would take place later this year when they come back to this board with final design drawings that have been engineered for the road and the utilities and the pad sites of those buildings. That's a separate application that, as the chairman explained at the beginning, would require approvals from the board, and what you see tonight is just a concept, does not receive approvals, just the board's input. So what you see right now, again, is rough grading and that stone road, which they were allowed to do under the town board's review that took place last year.
Okay. So is there some sort of an idea as to how close, looking ahead, if the board approves the plans, how close will the buildings or building, if there's only one, that looks like it would be this one, which would be the closest to our units. How close would a building be to our unit? Especially mine, because it's right on the end.
I haven't measured it, but the board can ask the applicant that question after you're done to get clarification on that distance. I just don't have it off the top of my head. I know initially, as they said, it's a minimum distance of 100 feet from all property lines, but in that case, it's certainly much more because you have the creek that goes through there and some wetland and floodplain boundaries that have kind of guided where the buildings have been located. I don't have the specific distance offhand right now, but we can ask that question when the applicant comes back up.
Okay. All right, I guess that's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, Henry Simon?
Henry Simon, 58 Winding Creek, Marlene's neighbor. Marlene asked most of the things that concern me. I'm having a little trouble orienting myself where our condos are with respect to which property line. That would be helpful if I could see that.
Okay.
I can't pack them all?
Yep. 3 condos in,
Right here.
no, we are way up at the back.
Way at the back, then
Yes.
these are your 3 here.
Okay, okay. So, is this the scale?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, just ask the questions in the
Oh, I'm
microphone for
sorry.
the question. I
Okay.
just wanted to help you point that out.
So now that I understand where our row of condos are, I'm just curious what the physical dimension is. We are just 100 feet from the property line, so I'm wondering what this tentatively proposed setback is. Right there?
Okay, we can get that answered for you. If you don't mind finishing up your comments, and then we'll have the applicant address what they can.
Marlene did an excellent job. That was the only thing that I had left.
Okay. All right, so I hope you guys wrote that down.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to comment? Sir, if you come on up.
Good evening, I'm Bob Sandholzer, 57 Waterview Circle. I'm the president of the board of the HOA at Elms Creek Valley. Needless to say, we have more than a casual interest in this development. I think that Marlene and Henry have noted a few of our major concerns. You might call them environmental concerns. Noise would be one. You could say light. We're concerned about the parking lots here. Here is where Marlene and Henry live. They've already endured quite a bit of noise and disruption here. Obviously, we would like to have as much buffer as possible from the development. I mean, we're a residential area. It's not just the visual part that says, oh, you're probably this far away, but in fact, the noise really does carry. And so we're very concerned about that. We're concerned about lighting. We're concerned about, our primary goal, obviously, as an association is to enhance the livability of our development. Obviously, values are one part also. I think it is encouraging to see that we have this buffer here, which does, in fact, I live up on this area up here, so I'm not quite as involved as Marlene and Henry are, but we would really like to have as much buffering as we can. The construction hours, that was an issue when they were clearing the land up by Marlene. Got this frantic call that there was some very, very heavy-duty equipment up there. And obviously there still is, and so we're concerned about the noise throughout the build-out of this development. We thought there was 150-foot regulation between, as a buffer, but you're saying 100 feet. So obviously, we would like to see that enhanced and enlarged up in this area for sure. So one of the other things is, of course, as there's a build out, is the garbage pickup in early morning. I think Marlene is hearing the reverse, noise from the major vehicles. Would be the same thing with. We can actually hear that over at behind Tops in the morning at 4:30, and so that's how it carries. So we would really like that to be thought, kept in mind as far as garbage pickup. As far as light pollution, I'm assuming that we would have guards on the lighting in the parking lots to ensure that we don't have any pollution there. Obviously, we're interested in seeing how this whole development transpires. I am encouraged by several things I've seen tonight that Peter mentioned. The visual lines are obviously also important. 2 to 3 stories, maybe 1 story, that would be even better. Trees removed, okay. So basically, we will be here for every meeting. I can guarantee you. We know that we're dealing with a really first-rate engineering firm, and I know that we've had conversations with Dutch Summers, and he has encouraged us to continue the communication and wants to make sure that we maintain good communications with him. So thank you very much for hearing us out.
Thank you.
Bob, I just wanted to add one thing for the setbacks.
Sure.
It is 150 feet for the building to be from the property line.
Okay.
I think as they were describing it in their presentation, they're trying to maintain, at least 100 feet of the vegetated buffer that's there, but the building would have to be sited 150 feet from the property line.
Okay, got it. Yep. Thanks, Zach.
Yep.
Thanks, Zach. Okay, would anyone else like to comment on this sketch plan? Yes, sir, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Allyn Feldstein. I live at 33 Hill Creek Road. I just would like a little clarification on something that I heard tonight. There's a big difference between a Class A office park and flex light industrial. And as I understood the discussion earlier, that this is going to be market driven, and that as these pads are sold off or leased off, it's going to be up to the owner occupant to determine what use they're going to make of that pad. So theoretically, we could end up not with a first-class office building, office park, but a flex space, which is very different both in appearance and in the activities that take place. L1 flex space could involve trucks at all hours, which is very different than having office space. So I'm just, I'm just asking whether that, if my understanding is correct, how this could potentially unfold as the project is developed. Thank you.
To address a question, I don't know if they're 100% certain on exactly what is going to be proposed there, and Peter can probably speak further to that. It is in a limited industrial zone, so there are certain code regulations that allow certain uses, and we are obligated to hear if they comply with the zoning ordinance. They have a right to come and make an application. So, we can ask the applicant to speak to that in their final remarks and maybe further describe their concept for the development.
AJ, if you'd like, I could just, there's a short list of the permitted uses within LI, just so everyone's aware of what's permitted within this district. All this is available on our code online under Chapter 250 for limited industrial. The first use as listed is scientific research or experimental development of materials, methods, or products, including engineering and laboratory research. Item B, light manufacturing, assembling, fabrication. Item C, offices. Item D, hotels. Item E, bear with me on this, but I have to read it because it's here. Adult uses and adult entertainment establishments. Again, that was a warning. They are permitted in this is the only district they're permitted in. That wasn't part of their presentation, but again. And finally, uses accessory to the above, which are an integral part of uses solely by the permitted use and are deemed appropriate by the authorized official. So there are other accessory uses of a lesser scale that would be permitted. Primarily in this area, you see things like Thermo Fisher, office parks, light manufacturing. So those types of uses are permitted within the zoning district.
Okay,
So
thanks. Go
Just
ahead.
to finish your inquiry, so the board doesn't have control over those uses that are already permitted under current zoning, but we do have control over where the buildings are and what the buffering is and what they may look like. So if that helps.
Right. Anyone else like to comment on this sketch plan? Okay, any other comments from the board members? All right, Peter, do you mind answering some of the questions
Whatever ones you have,
that...
AJ.
Well, we had a couple of questions from Marlene and one from Henry, so I don't know if that's something that...
Okay. Well, if I leave any of them out, just from what I jotted down, feel free to ask. But Zach, one of the big ones, he did clarify correctly. The building setback is 150 feet, but what we're looking to do is maintain at least a 100-foot buffer of the topography and the vegetation that's there. The zoning code dictates the 50-foot building setback as a minimum. But obviously, and as Mr. Burton clearly pointed out, that'll be one of the tenets of site plan review too, as to appearance and whatnot like that. Let's see. Oh, and then as it relates to the use, yes, we've explained what is the desire of the applicant. We are not, we will comply with the ordinance of what the allowed uses are. But the key part is this will be a owner and a owner lease park. There is and it maybe even gets a little bit to the security. The owner has a vested interest in that this park presents itself in the proper way, for lack of a better way to put it, because that is what the market will demand. Again, we've used Linden Oaks a little bit as a reference, but that is their competition. If you think about that, and again, maybe I'm partial. We worked on Linden Oaks, and that is a very good park as to what they do. So, and what that does is quality drives quality. So that is their goal. That is their intent. Does that mean that if there's a user that comes in and has a small assembly function to it or a warehousing need, would we say no? No, but as Mr. Burton clearly pointed out, this board has the ability through site plan review and certain provisions there to talk about size, scale, location, architectural treatments, things like that. All lighting would be LED lighting, which will be dark sky compliant. LED fixtures today, if you're familiar with them, just do not have the light glow issues that the traditional metal halide and high pressure sodium fixtures of the 90s and the 2000s had.
Right.
Regarding to noise and whatnot, it is the compliance with the town code as it relates to that, as to the working hours. And as was mentioned, I will admit, there was an initial issue with that, with some of the initial work that was done out here under the town board permit. And we did have a meeting with the HOA at the clubhouse back, I think in November-ish or so, I don't remember the exact date. And that issue was brought up. There was staff present at that meeting also, and I believe the owner applicant has subsequently, acknowledged that they were in error and have abided by that since then. And I can speak for Mr. Summers, the owner here, to reiterate what the HOA representative is. They do intend to maintain communication with the HOA, without a doubt. They understand that they are their neighbor.
Okay.
Okay? I don't know if there's anything I left out.
Do you have offhand that distance they were asking about
from here to
from those
here?
houses, that one?
Yeah, that distance.
I don't have a scale
Okay,
with me.
I would guess. To the parking area here, that's about probably 250 feet from the property line. So, and I know enough about this topography off the top of my head. This building will slide up into this area, so it'll be 300 feet probably that is there. And I know that this area here, this is important as it relates to the buffer. As identified on the town's EPOD map, you have a stream corridor identified. So by code, that stream corridor has a 75-foot buffer on it on each side by the EPOD. And that is, and it is shown on the maps we provided, it is right through this area. So, and there is a federal wetland in this area here that is delineated on your maps. And so by those regulations there, we can't encroach into them.
Right.
So that almost gives a permanence to that buffer just by the regulations of the stream corridor, EPOD, and the federal wetland presence.
Okay.
Okay?
And so based on that, the building one there, I'll say the north building, would you say that's about 150 feet from the property line to its nearest corner then?
Yes, because actually it's interesting is because this is the width of the complete stream buffer, because that stream does this.
So 150?
And that's 150, yeah. So.
Okay.
And that's how that building was set there too.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. And we will call this hearing closed.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep, we're back on the air. Okay, so we should get a letter out. I think we can get some thoughts down on paper pretty quick.
Well, I think my first thought is I can't recall the last time that we had a neighbor to come and speak and be complimentary about the design team and the developer.
Yeah.
So it's pretty refreshing and nice to hear.
Absolutely.
That they're taking the time to meet with the owners and address their concerns.
Yes.
We should be encouraging more and more of that.
We always do upstairs. They actually
I'm sure you do.
They spent a fair amount of time with one of our engineers and Jim Costello last week, I believe, or the week before, in going through the plans that you saw, asking questions to inform them, and I think that was a great effort by their part.
Well, you know, I think the obvious thing that Peter said is if they're going for Class A office space, then you can't mix Class A office space with, light manufacturing, running 2 shifts and all that,
Well, I also think that the nature of the cost of the land is going to preclude that type of development. If you have
You're probably right.
if you have a manufacturing facility or something,
But
you
there might be
want
some high-tech research.
that's different.
Thermal Fisher,
software
right? They
engineering,
could
Yep, with
build a
offices
building.
on top.
Paychecks could come back there if
Right.
they wanted to expand.
Right.
Years ago, they wanted to
But the
expand.
concern that they had was the,
Maybe they'll
the
give us another chance, though, Come
yeah,
back.
yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
I think the concern from the gentleman that spoke was the cheapest metal building you can put up and, chemical plant or something that is creating a nuisance. Yeah. And I can't see that being something that would be economically viable for that type of business in that type of business park.
Yeah.
But
The only,
whether it's zoned for it or not, it just,
and one of the things that is a mild concern to me is the staging area. So you come in and you start the site development work on any project, and you put some storage trailers in and some porta potties and a boneyard and piles of stone, and to have that out here by the road for the town to look at for 5 or 6 years is not really ideal.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we should certainly put into the sketch plan letter. That's also something that could be, maybe there's a berm that's seeded or something for that
maybe
period of time.
Maybe
that
they
is
can
a-
get maybe they can get,
Buffer.
as they cut this road in, they can create a staging area back here adjacent to building 1 or something that's
Back, yeah.
a
Right.
little further away that.
Are they allowed to work on Sundays?
No. That's what Peter was saying, when he came back up to speak for the second time, is that the town had addressed that because we received a call from the neighbors there. And then they met with staff, the owners, they met with the staff, they met with the HOA of Allyn's Creek, and that issue came up and has since been resolved.
Okay.
Luckily, it was just that one occasion on Sunday.
Well, I was wondering if they're just dropping off equipment on that particular day anyways,
No,
opposed to
they were
doing the
doing
work?
work.
They were doing work?
They were doing work, but that quickly came to a close. So,
Excellent.
honestly, it's a mistake, it happens.
Okay.
Good.
Overall,
Looked good. Yeah.
to me, this is the type of development that brings jobs and economic development to an area.
Correct.
It doesn't,
It's low density and it's great use of a tough piece of land.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, it's going to be a shift, day shift. It's not going to be 2 shifts or 3 shifts.
I think
Wouldn't
we can
think so.
ask.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, that's what I took away.
It sounds
from
like it's gonna be almost modeled like Linden Oaks.
Yeah.
They want
Yeah.
it, at least they want it to be.
If they can attract that, I mean,
That'd be real nice.
I think that's a question that they should be prepared to answer for each final application they bring in for
Right.
each building.
right.
I'm overall not concerned, at the next phase, as they outlined, when they're coming in for preliminary overall to do the road, utilities, and pads, obviously that information's not available yet, but we don't want to lose track of that.
Right.
So definitely want to put it in the sketch letter, so you'd be prepared to discuss that.
So maybe,
When the
maybe we
final
go a
comes in.
step further and ask them to provide us, clearly they have some kind of a demographic study and a marketing outline. Perhaps they'd be willing to share that with us so that we can get a better idea what the direction is, and you'd have a better way of responding to inquiries that you might have from the public. And
It's a good idea.
That's a good idea. All right, we put that in the letter. Anything else?
Couple things I would ask for, and it's something that we've been looking at as staff, between the plans that came in originally with this application and the updated plans you saw tonight, just that the applicant, as they're designing their plans, not to lose track of these references with regards to the buildings and the parking layouts while they are not final, to not lose track of these in relation to which you'll see on the cover sheet of the plan set that you received, where it showed like developable area A, developable area B.
so why don't we ask them to define those in a separate plan?
That's what we were going for.
So, building pads
Building
with,
pads,
with,
yeah.
with setback distances from all boundaries.
Kind of like a, if you will, a max build-out plan, because, part of the seeker review that will come with the next application is for the overall square footage of the entire project. And that's something that would be kept track of as each building gets constructed, similar to what we did in Baytown Plaza for those outbuildings. So, as long as we keep that
They
picture
got a
in
lot more
mind.
room they got a lot more wiggle room to work with here.
They do. I mean, each one's its own build.
Yeah, but I mean, if they show the pad area can have a footprint of twice the potential building area. But
Right,
they have
so
to work
really the
within, they have to
setbacks.
work within that.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe,
That was something we were gonna ask, as part of being a board's comment back to the applicant. And that would have been, if these had been available when the PRC memo came out, that would have been one of our comments. These came in after the fact, so we have not issued a PRC memo based on this. I've gathered those comments for tonight's conversation, and that was the biggest one out of all of it. It's just to ensure that no message is lost between what Doug is showing on the left and the right.
Right.
would it be appropriate also to ask at least what their preliminary building heights are?
They're not gonna know that now.
You don't think?
Up to 50 feet is all the,
Or what the maximum might be for a particular pad?
I don't think.
I would say it's probably 50 feet. I mean,
You know,
Okay.
the thing is, if you
And-
think about this site and where it is and sight lines from the two
Yeah.
major roads, where you're building into a hill, then you could have 3 stories, like he said.
Linden Oaks
Exactly.
is perfect
But we're not gonna wanna see at the top of the hill a 3-story building, you know,
Exactly.
destroying the landscape beyond.
Something we could ask for.
personally, I wouldn't, I don't want to put restrictions at this point on designs and possibilities.
Just see what
See
they
what
come
comes
up
through.
with.
That's my view, anyway.
Something I would suggest, since it will be part of the seeker, is doing a building cross-section, like we did with Allyn Heights, I believe, where
That worked.
Yeah.
put
Yeah,
a box
because you
there
show- But
with
because
a
you
max
show the
height.
rooftop in relation to the treetops
Correct.
and the grade. And they're not gonna wanna do that either, because, you know, they're trying to sell this area that's very, you know, heavily buffered by natural vegetation and beautiful topography.
You buy a building or buy a lot there and put your business, you want it, if you're going there, you want it to be nice.
Well, and you want it to be
Yeah.
consistent. You wanna make sure that the next building up the road, they're not
Right.
gonna do something.
Correct.
You know,
Well, kind of if their goal is 350,000 square feet with those 5 buildings,
No,
6 buildings.
350 total with this here too.
with that there, okay.
So this, I think, is 250 and this is 100, or
Correct.
Which one's 100?
something like.
The
The area
old
where the
hotels.
hotels were gonna be,
Yeah.
that'd be more of a retail restaurant-y type.
So
Which,
given-
again, that's nice for Thermo Fisher, you know, people who go to lunch and,
You don't have to go very far.
yeah.
Yeah, right there.
But with that, we should make sure that there's sidewalks that go up the hill and down the hill.
Pedestrian access.
Sometimes, yeah,
Good point.
you know, pedestrian access.
Yeah, because they don't have that in Linden Oaks.
No,
No,
Walk
they
down
no,
the road.
yeah,
That would have been nice because it's such a nice park setting
yeah,
back in there.
yeah, and a lot
Yeah.
of people want to walk at lunch, it'd be a beautiful place to walk.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a real good comment.
Is it too early for me to ask if you're supportive of both sides or one side?
On both sides, probably, there,
Yeah, because kind of.
You got
gonna
buildings,
be a-
yeah, buildings
yeah.
on both sides.
yeah.
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 Just wanted to ask.
Now, Fisher Thermal, they run 3 shifts, right?
I believe
Yes.
so, yes, they're 24/7.
Can I rewind back to my cross-section comment? Is that something you'd like to see with
Some
future
conceptual
plans?
cross-section,
Yeah, conceptual, yeah.
I think it's part of the
Yeah.
visual analysis when it comes to seeker,
Absolutely.
so I think that would benefit the board to have that right away.
Yes.
Sure.
Any concerns on that grade, road grade?
As you
Or not
said,
really?
8%
It's in
within our
code.
design code.
Okay.
Anything more than that, it would have to be a private drive. But I mean, if you try to alter it too much, you may run out of room with
Yeah.
some of the topography that's out there.
Right.
You're kind of creating,
No, you gotta cut vegetation to
you're creating a lot of
navigate
issues.
grade, that's,
To try and create 5% is nearly impossible on that site.
Kind of familiar, opposite Linden Oaks, you drive back in there, there is a pretty good grade. It goes down there, but I don't know the
It changes in
specifics.
there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Changes a lot. This is more of an uphill situation where you go up, flattens out, up again. Linden Oaks is kinds of more hills and valleys.
Right.
And again, a much larger site, as the applicant stated. So overall, I hear support for the project. I have a few specific comments written down, along with our standard comments that will be issued with a sketch letter regarding, in this case, just the engineering details that will be provided for the board. Is that a magic trick?
it was. And look,
Especially with stormwater and tree preservation and so on and so forth. Blah, 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 blah. Any other questions, comments,
I'm
concerns?
good.
No, I think we got enough for the letter. Somebody want to move it?
Second.
All right, I'll move it. Move we send a letter.
Terry's a question, flipped it into a statement and it's all great.
Hetzke,
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Canower.
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
All right. Any other business before the board for
sir.
tonight?
That's all we have.
All right, our next meeting is February
14th.
Our next meeting
No.
is tomorrow,
12th,
5:30.
7th?
Yeah.
February
7th it is?
Understand.
So it's not on that, we moved it up a week because we avoided the holiday of Valentine's Day.
Right.
So we're on the 7th.
Oh, we
It's still
did.
technically the second Thursday of the month.
So, but February 7th is our next meeting?
Yes.
First. Oh wait, first is a Friday? First is a Friday, so it's the second, it's the first Thursday of the month. We moved it
Otherwise,
up a
it
week.
would have been on the 7th.
Correct.
What's it?
We're on the 7th.
It is the 7th?
Correct.
You sure?
I'm sure.
We just need somebody there to let people in our house.
Oh, man.
I have to make sure I'm here.
Adjourn?
No, I'm here. What's that? Yeah, we will adjourn. Have a good night, everybody.
Posting doesn't go